All right, Nick, we're ready. All right, good morning. And as we will be moving quickly into the afternoon, just wanted to say welcome. Glad you are with us. And I want to introduce our main presenter and speaker today, who's really facilitating a conversation. And that is Stephen, the Prof. Cleveland, or Professor Stephen Cleveland, coming to us from Cal State University East Bay. He is also a filmmaker, educator, and as I mentioned, lecturer at Cal State East Bay in the Department of Ethnic Studies, and also in the Department of History. So he is very embedded within the community in the East Bay area, but also up and down the state. So he's here today talking about an initiative, particularly the Black Excellence Project, which has been very instrumental in highlighting great things happening up and down the state, but particularly within the CSU system. Everything from our Black resource centers to other initiatives that are helping with students in graduation, in retention, and progression, and all the other things that we need to have happen for our students. Also, we'll be considering many other aspects, but how to support students. And so one of the main outcomes I know we've talked about is making sure that we have information that is helpful, that is direct support for students. So we are recording today also because we want to share good information with not just us here at CSUSB, but that is definitely a priority. You see, I got my Coyote Blue on. But we also want to share with other folks across the state. I will say we had a chance to meet a couple of weeks ago over at Cal State University Dominguez Hills with the folks from Sacramento State and the Black Achievement efforts that they have at that statewide level. So we wanted to make those connections. So again, without further ado, Professor Stephen Cleveland, please give him a hand.
Thank you. Well, I'm excited to be here, y'all. It is a pleasure always to share space with good people, and I have had the distinct honor to be able to serve our communities from Hawaii to Southern California to Northern California, all the way up to Oregon. And so the idea is for me, looking at ways that we can learn from each other to really be in community because it's really clear to me that our next steps are not going to be things where we ask institutions to solve problems for us. Our next steps are going to be centered in us figuring out how do we solve problems for ourselves, and hopefully through the example of how we do solve those problems, uh, inspire change across our university for all of our students. Because to be very clear, our graduation rates for Black students are not as high as our counterparts, but our graduation rates, period, are things we need to be working on, especially if we want to keep our institutions relevant for the communities that we are needing to serve in order for California to be the greatest state in the United States, which I can say after traveling many of those states, it is the bright light on the hill. And so just because it's a little dim doesn't mean it's still not the brightest light on the hill. And it's important for us to understand our roles in that. And so the Black Excellence Project has really came out of that, right? I am a guy who is a storyteller at heart, and the foundations of the world. A brother of mine that I partner with in Portland, his mantra was, he was like, when the lions don't tell their tales, then history will always glorify the hunter, right? It's an African proverb. And I think about that very seriously when I think about the work we're doing uh, in our community, is that a lot of times we're doing great work. A lot of times we have solutions that actually could solve some of the big problems going on, but we just don't do a good enough storytelling, right? I don't know that we value storytelling. How many people know that Kendrick Lamar performed at the Super Bowl, right? Right. So storytelling is powerful, but the thing that I don't think we connect with is to understand people pay hundreds of millions of dollars to co-opt the narratives that are told in those stories, right? So we can say, well, you sold out. But then we have to ask ourselves, are we valuing these stories in the way we should be? Have we misappropriated the number that goes with it? Like, oh, everybody can rap, right? Or, these things we just take for granted. And so part of this work for me is figuring out how, as an outsider, insider, I can help institutions tell their stories better, and to really get to the core of the story. The work we do has three folds to it. We are unapologetically Black because the data says we should be. We are asset based, so we're not looking for highlighting things that are wrong. That story keeps being told, and someone else will do it. I'll let them have that. We look for assets, so we're looking at things in institutions that work to serve students and look for ways we can amplify those things, ways we can partner with those things, and ways we can actually resource those things so they can expand and be better. And the final thing we believe in is work that's cradle to career. I think that for a long time, which we're in a new age now, right? Because the need for new students enrollment has forced us to. But for a long time, we felt that our role was this sacred space of delivering rigor to young people, right? Protecting scholarship. And I think that the one thing is really clear now: people ain't spending no money to get rigor or to get scholarship. People are spending money to change their lives, to be able to change their ability to provide for their community. And so I really, really think it's important for us to acknowledge that as we are doing things. So having a cradle to career approach to what we do, to understand that our work is, yes, giving great citizens all the tools they need to be great citizens. But in addition to making them great citizens, we're also inviting them to apply that citizenry in a way that can help them and their families and the future generations do better. And so those are the three values we bring to the work that we're doing. And you'll see some of the principles. We have 6 principles that emerge from the conversations we have with folks, and the conversation I'm going to have Brother Gamble is gonna go into that a little bit. So I won't tarry in that regard. But I just wanted to ask her a question that I heard floating out there, and it was why. So why are we here? What is this event about? And so that's an important piece, I think, for me to sort of attempt to frame and answer. Um, a lot of you have never heard of Black Excellence Project. The Black Excellence Project is not a household name, right? You know about Black excellence because we live it, right, and breathe it. And so, one of the reasons why we're here today is for folks to get introduced to what it is we're about. And I found that it's hard for people to necessarily understand, maybe fully intellectually, all the different pieces we're doing. Even when I give you those 3 values and I lay out these principles, you still may not intellectually understand it, but I understand that we communicate not just intellectually, right? We communicate emotionally and spiritually as well, right? So I want y'all to feel me, and being in space with me will allow you to feel me and what I'm about, the energy I'm on. And to see me sharing space with people is a really important piece of communicating as well. So that as we maybe work in our brains to catch what intellectually the Black Excellence Project's about, my hope is you can also get to feel what it's about, right? And get to see what it's about. And that will help fill that picture. So that's one of the things we're hoping to do today. Second thing we're trying to do today is just have a conversation. Me and this guy, I've got to say, it's been one of the, I shared with Rafiq. I was like, I'm really uh, blown away by who you are, how you show up. And it really inspires me in the work that I'm doing, which is my work is not about me. It's not about Black Excellence Project. It's about finding stuff and institutions that work that we can then support and move forward on. Things I've observed over and over again is that we keep restarting new presidents, new ideas, new conferences, new ideas. And so one of the biggest forms of feedback we got when we were talking to students was the program that they started with doesn't exist anymore. So if a program is not here for 5 years, most of our students won't even, the thing they started with, the person that they touch base may be in a new program with a new name. And so I think that's the other piece. So our conversations are really grounded on. Uh, I tell people, how do we serve Black students in crisis? And not saying that Black students are in crisis. I don't want. That's not what the mentality is. But to say that, like, when you want to serve a Black student in crisis, my hypothesis is you have to start when there's no crisis, right? You have to have infrastructure. As a dad, I found out that you can't pay rent the day the rent is due if you have not planned to pay rent before, right? And I think that the way we deal with Black students generally is a surprise that some of the stuff that should obviously come up in regards to the Black experience when it happens, and not being ill prepared to make that pivot. So we're going to talk a lot about that, or a little bit about that, man, a lot. And the last piece, I'm looking to identify folks who are moved in their spirit, moved in what they see, who want to be ambassadors for this work. Because the reality of it is, Black Excellence Project is not about the idea is I'm bringing the vision of what I see when I go to Hawaii and I do a youth conference there. We just did that with NAACP Hawaii and local schools, or when I go to Portland and we put together a workforce development project, right? But that's not what it's about. What it's about is bringing that stuff to y'all, and then y'all telling me, hey, this part works, not that part, this part, right? And us putting together a local answer to how do we support Black student success on this institution, and doing it intentionally, not by mistake. And so, I love the commitment from the president, from the provost office, uh, seeing that in the person of Brandon here today. That's a commitment. And so the idea is, like, how do we take advantage of that commitment to be able to build sustainable change? And so that piece is super important. So yeah, looking for folks who want to say, hey, I like that. Let's support it. And so there are opportunities for faculty, opportunities for staff, opportunities for students to engage with us in helping us move this mission forward, which is simply identifying assets, uh, being unapologetically Black in how we move, and looking at ways we can connect the community, right? Because we got to figure out how we do better to prepare Black men in particular before they get here, right? So Black women have done exceptionally better than Black men, but yet we still are at the bottom in terms of numbers of graduation and retention, right? Because Black men are doing that bad, right? So to understand how do we make connections to solidify the work we're doing there, to make sure that we see success among men and women. So that's what we got going. And so um, so the conversation is about, the first part of this is a conversation about how do we support Black students in crisis. And I'm gonna use the frame uh, of these principles that emerged from the conversations I had with students in the interviews for the last 3 years. And that's our conversation we're gonna have. And afterwards, the idea is then we're gonna invite students up to then let us know if what we're talking about matters, right? Because that's an important piece I think that often institutions missed is, if what we're doing only works theoretically, then we can never get real change. And the only way you'll know if it really works is to talk to the people you're trying to serve. And so I just really embrace that holistically and excited about doing that work. And so when I bring you back up here, brother, we're going to start with talking about anything, just an intro to your thoughts on um, serving Black students in crisis. How do we set ourselves up to win in that particular space? And so I'm ready if you are.
Oh, I'm up. Okay.
We will find it.
Hopefully he'll make it. Um, yeah, so crisis. Being a psychologist for a long time, I got trained a lot in crisis response. And just like you're saying, you have to do the prep before it happens. You have to strap down everything and have relationships and have understandings, have vocabulary that's together before the crisis comes. So the first thing that comes to mind, I was working at my alma mater, a small HBCU, Oakwood University in Huntsville, Alabama. My kids were going to school there as well during the shutdown. And so if folks don't have those relationships when the whole city shuts down,
Yeah.
when the whole state shuts down, it's difficult to kind of respond to that. And I think right now we're dealing with some of the aftermath to that. And some good pieces from my perspective as someone who used to work in mental health, particularly as a school psychologist, folks are thinking deeply about their own mental health and accessing those resources. So here we have 1 out of 4 of our students at Cal State University San Bernardino receives accommodations for disabilities. That likely means it's 1 out of 3. And there's a group who's not accessing all those services or even fully aware of the kinds of accommodations and supports that they need, and vice versa, because that's a significant growth. When I talk to our um, services for students with disabilities director, they told me that, look, we've grown exponentially since the shutdown. So what people thought they knew before, we're in a totally different space. So that comes with data, knowledge, and information. So if I think of crisis, I go back to E. Franklin Frazier, and forgive me for nerding out here. I'm an academic. I read these books, but more recently, William Cross, who passed away. William Cross was a psychologist who studied the emergence of young people in college from Negro to Black during the 1960s, 70s, and he kept it up all the way through the 90s. And recently, before he passed away in 2021, he wrote a book as well. But his concern was that we're often making decisions about and for Black students without knowing Black students. And he was able to cite all the way back to the 1920s and 30s that the data was wrong, but yet people were making decisions because it was legally expedient about, and one example was the self-esteem of Black students. And we're concerned about their overall self-esteem, yet Black folk didn't have a problem with self-esteem according to any measure, particularly Francis Cecil Sumner, who was the first Black psychologist, but this was his work too, and he was a mentor for Kenneth and Mamie Clark. I don't know if you've heard of Kenneth and Mamie Clark, but if you've heard of Brown versus the Board of Education, they were the psychologists who did the doll test, right? And so Francis Sumner was like, what are y'all doing? You're missing out on a key piece. Black folks are just fine. When they go to college, as well as when they matriculate through college, they're not worried about their deep identity structures or whatever. They don't have these pathologies that you've assigned to them. They're actually have their own structure and ways of dealing with these things. And I'll just kind of fine point that with Ruby Bridges. I don't know if you ever saw the movie about Ruby Bridges, but in it, and sometimes how these Hollywood movies do, there's a psychologist who can't understand how these Black folk were able to survive. He's like, I've heard of Jesus, but that's a different type of Jesus these Black folks are worshiping. That's a different type of resilience that this young woman has demonstrated in the face of significant adversity. We don't have anything like that to explain what this is. Well, that's Black psychology. And so our understanding and our vocabulary and our ways of sharing our own resilience and overcoming is important in the midst of a crisis, before, after, and even sometimes stopping a crisis before it even really gets going. And we have those things. As I see folks throughout the room, whether it's the Black Faculty and Staff Student Association, whether it's our Pan-African Student Success Center, with our Black Student Union, which started all the way back in 1969, we have these structures here on campus. Now it's a matter of how do we continue to bring them to bear to address crises that come our way.
I love it. Yeah, it hits on exactly a lot of the stuff that we sort of have and found in our conversation. So we begin our work with a conversation with 25 students from Cal State East Bay who graduated in 2 years as transfer or in 4 years as freshmen. And the look was a counter data. So we were looking at the people who were the exceptions, right? So less than 10% of Black folks during that time period were graduating in 4 years as freshmen. and less than 30% of Black folks were graduating in 2 years as transfers. So we were talking to those folks. And that was the basis of the work that we were doing. And so what emerged from those conversations was 6 principles. And one of those he talked about, right? It was knowing who your Black students are, understanding that at each institution you're serving a different set of Black folks, right? With 1 in 4 utilizing services, it's an evolved group of Black folk who understand that there are things that are there for them. I spend many a time talking to Black folks in my classes, trying to let them know that those resources are there. I was like, you don't have to struggle through this alone. They're like, I'm feeling anxious or just lost my uncle. I was like, those are things you can go and get extra time for. You can have support services. Someone can help you cope and manage. And so I think one of the things, the frame of this conversation was if you were talking to professors, right? Not just Black professors, but any professors at CSUSB, these are the principles that are going. And so the first one is that, like knowing who your Black students are. And so I love for you to talk a little bit about that in terms of offering resources. Like, how do you learn who your Black students are? How do you do that in the structure of the classroom without calling them out and making them feel a little awkward? I mean, that's a real question.
So here in the state of California, we're all very aware of Prop 209, which doesn't allow us to necessarily mine a bunch of data for Black students. But there's also a moment where Black students have to opt in to a certain experience that they want on campus. So it's an interesting dynamic when you've opted into a program. So, and it kind of starts with, and I have some students here who work at the Office of Black Student Success, and we do what's called tabling together. So, and I didn't understand this phrase until I moved from the faculty side to the student affairs side. Student affairs, they do a lot of tabling. They set up a table, they set up little trinkets and other things, and they have people come by and they talk and they just tell you about the programs that we have. What I found doing this early on at Oakwood College and at San Diego State and now here is I can't wait for Black students to come. I got to go to where they're at. Literally, sometimes if they're walking by, just be, hey, what's up? Good to see you. 5 seconds. Just need you to know that there's an Office of Black Student Success. Peace. Next time I see you, though, we're going to take 30 seconds, right? And we want to develop a relationship. Now, underneath all that data is knowing that there are the graduation rates and the progression rates. And so we're able to collect that data because the federal government is interested in that data, as well as our state reps are interested in that data. And so we got to go behind sometimes and look for that. Now, what Cal State San Bernardino has done, which is pretty nice, we've created a data dashboard. It's not available to the general public because we're not making decisions about admissions. I hope I said that technically correct. But we do have a data dashboard for students who have identified themselves as African American, and we do outreach to all the students because all our programs are available to anyone. Again, I said that CSU correct. But we want to make sure that we're making them aware that they're welcome here and that there are programs that are aligned with the way that they want to experience a university. And so we take a look at some of that data, and I had a chance to look at that as far as our students' GPAs and see how students did in the fall and moving into the spring. And we narrowed it down to there's about 15 to 20 students who did not get above a 2.0. And we immediately want to reach out to them, let them know that we're here to help, period. And sometimes the language is even, I'm your mentor, I'm your direct person, I'm your direct support person. I just want you to know a few things. Also, this work is not easy. If it were easy, everybody would be doing it, everybody would have figured it out. But under the circumstances that we're working now, I'm not even talking about the federal folks, but yes, I'll talk about them for a second. Proclamations against DEI and other things. It's interesting to me that Black folks were being educated before any DEI programs. And my sense is we'll continue to find ways to educate ourselves well beyond that, whether it's legal or not. I just call up Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Fannie Lou Hamer, Mary McLeod Bethune, people who made a way out of no way when they were telling them that it couldn't happen. So we have to engage in some of that spirit, but definitely utilizing the data so we better know our students. And I mentioned the access of the accommodation resources. First, because that was a significant shift for me coming here, and it just indicated like Cal State University San Bernardino has a very particular population that's willing to utilize the services. I've had a chance to meet with other high school folks too, school counselors, school psychologists, and they're very much advocating for the students to be aware of their own supports and needs. So I would say our counseling and psychological services, we have a couple of counselors here who are Black counselors who, and I say that and not just as they happen to be Black, but they are intentional in their efforts of understanding who their student population is. And that comes along with the data and literature about Black students. So one thing that I was very excited that was coming around 2016, 2018, there were several different studies at universities in the United States done by psychologists that were seeing that Black students were more likely to refer their friends for mental health services. And this was a new trend. And it goes against some of the stigma that is put upon Black folks that, oh, they're not going to utilize those services. Therefore, the referral isn't made. It's kind of connected to the ideas of the discrimination that occurs in healthcare in relation to Black people don't experience pain or they're less likely to experience the pain, according to even own physician statements, which they're supposed to be ruled by science. It seems just a ridiculous idea, but yet their behavior follows in that, which leads to, awful mortality rates for mothers of Black babies. So, and other kind of issues like higher hypertension, less likely to get pain meds, less likely to even be seen sometimes, right? But it parallels that thing where people don't necessarily make a referral because they don't think Black folks will. Well, no. And this goes back to my statement earlier about what William Cross was doing. Like, no, Black folk will use services. Black folk will follow through on things that they need to. We didn't get here by accident when it comes to our working at a university system, when it comes to graduating and matriculating from a university system. There's a whole group of folks behind us, our social capital networks are, and those are the folks who are around us, who embed us, who, whether it's my grandfather who didn't graduate from 8th grade, but yet wanted to make sure that my mom went to college, and all those folks and he would pray over me every time. And I'm like, okay, Grandpa, yet again. But he knew exactly where I needed to go. He sees things that I don't see. And so as a graduate student, I had real good embedded folks around me. And so my assessment when I'm working with a student individually is who are the people who you have embedded around you? What are the resources that you have that you know that you need, or maybe that you don't know that you need, but let's go through a checklist of things that you need to make sure that you have everything you need to navigate this. And maybe every once in a while, you're not on the path that you need to be on. You're on a path that somebody else put you on. And let's get you going back to the whole crisis piece. But we got to develop those relationships, get them those resources.
I love it. I love it. For me, uh, giving them resources makes sense. And when you have the skill set you have, engaging them directly makes sense. But for those of you out there who are faculty don't have those things as a natural place, right? How then, I would suggest one of the things as a faculty member is to educate yourself, right, on who they are. I think that's the piece. And so understanding demographic data, not only in your school, but also demographic data in your department, to understand that you're looking at 1 in 4 Black students who are major in your department, and shifting the way you deal with them and understand what it feels to be a part of an isolated group. If you're looking at 1 of 3 women who are in your department, to understand that. So the idea is educating yourself on who they are so that then you can empathize with them in terms of what it feels like to be a part of the group that they're there. And so that's the first step I would offer to all faculty to know who they are when they show up, so you can identify.
I just want to add a piece. So, when it comes to events that we host, having a follow up survey for that event, so we're able to not only just keep track of how we're doing, but also have a better understanding of who's coming and who's connecting for that event. I think the other thing that I used to do as a faculty member that changed, like I was getting bad evaluations for a while because I was just the rigor. Like I got to come with rigor, and it's got to be hard, and I gotta give them the hard rigor in order for them to feel like they got something. Yeah, yeah. So what I started doing is I said, you know what? Let me just do some action research. If I have a problem, I'm a scientist, so I say, let me actually be one, and ask, how are they feeling about taking this class? What do they know? What assets do they already bring to the class? And what do they hope to get out of the class? Because there's this whole long syllabus that says all these things are supposed to happen, but do all those things happen every semester in the way that they need to? We're going to get the general pieces, but things happen and ebb and flow. So that action research helped me become a better professor, but also helped the students reduce their anxiety. I just found that it's a lot of my students, especially psychology students, I was a psych professor, they had a lot of anxieties about the topics that we were going over. But taking time to just figure that out, man, it shifted the whole conversation in the classroom.
Love it. Love it. So yeah, that's awesome. Another tool for faculty folk. And so I think that, the first, again, the first thing, thank you. I was like, that's a great idea. Um, so the first step, the thing that came out of our research was looking at knowing who the students are. So if you know who they are, it can help you set that. The second thing to help you set how you interact with them is when we have the students come up, we're going to have them give us some insight on how to do that better as well. Um, the second thing we learn is that know the programs and events that are being offered on your campus or in the community that are explicitly or enthusiastically and or exclusively for Black students. And I think these things are important to say. It doesn't have to be always exclusively Black, but it has to be something that is explicitly Black and that is enthusiastically Black. And I think those things are super important. This is the students kept saying, is that it's just, we got to know you want us there. You got to say, hey, and the Black kids, right? You gotta, if you say it, it changes everything for them. So for us as faculty, being aware of what those things are, those safe spaces for them to go into as programmatic pieces, that's another thing that emerged. The other thing that emerged was also knowing who the folks are, who both on campus and off campus, who look like our students. But our students told me that more importantly, is that they see them. They said that they don't mind as much seeing having Black folk who don't see them. They were like, it's almost worse to have Black folks who don't see us, or Black folks who are about that rigor, right? I most definitely remember that because I went through it. Like we were both. My professors were serious about the rigor, right? Like, and so for me, I felt like representing Blackness, I had to keep doing that. And I think a part of the thing was listening and saying, like, all right, what is the purpose of the assessment, right? Is the purpose of the assessment to deliver rigor? And if it is, that's pretty whack. Like, I was like, the purpose of the assessment is to assess if they are learning what we want them to learn, right? What the requirements are in terms of learning objectives, right? And so being co-creators is really one of the big shifts that I had there. But I think that even that, as a professor, if you're serving Black students, knowing who the demographics are important, but also knowing with the programs you can send them to. Say, hey, if you're feeling alone, I know there are only 2 of you in the department, right? So I don't know if you know about this program. Let me share this program with you. Or to say, I don't know if you know this person. This person has committed their lives to doing this work, right? This office is committed to doing that work. So as professors, that's a resource that we should be able to assess quickly and be able to pass to our students in regards to that, so that it doesn't require us to change the curriculum. I hope that that's clear. I'm not asking people to add in extra stuff to their curriculum, or to learn a new thing to test them on, or to come up with them. But it's the idea of doing a little bit of research to get yourself an understanding of who you're serving. And to be clear, I'm saying this for Black students, but it's not really set on Black students. Knowing who the demographics in your department is, period, right? Knowing that is an important tool for showing up. Why? Because we no longer are purveyors of facts. There's something called the Google that can purvey facts much better than we do. We got AI that's going better than Google. So no longer are we our jobs anymore to be purveyors of fact. Our job are to hold space. Our job is to provide the thing we talked about earlier, an emotional, spiritual connection, a visual connection to the intellectual, because we're not dropping science like we used to, literally. Like you have to bust out the encyclopedia to go look for stuff now. That doesn't happen. So the work we're doing has to be about people, right? And so knowing who those people are, knowing what the programs are that'll make that person feel centered, knowing who the people on campus are to make those folks feel centered. Those are three of the top things that came out of the conversations. The fourth thing was, what is your personal commitment to ongoing attacks, or ongoing work to educate and address anti-Black racism? Note that this work doesn't require that you as a professor lead or be the treasurer of that organization, right? It just means that you are committed to doing work uh, as a scholar, or doing work with your hands, with your physical body, to support anti-Black, to fight anti-Black racism. Because if you do it, then you don't have to talk to your students about that, right? But they feel it. It's that feel, right? So the only way people can feel you is they look at you, they see what you're doing, and then they take note, right? So you can say I'm about something, but when you see that they're, oh, wait a minute, they got that as a Black student, then it allows them to be there. And I think that that's what my students were telling us when we were having these conversations, was they felt like these folks were discovering racism for the first time. Like they didn't understand that racism exists. And so that's when a Black student sees that, then they know they're not safe, right? Because this person oftentimes will be in a situation, has anybody had this happen before, where you're in a classroom and a professor comes to you and asks you a question as the Black expert, right? Could you help me understand this thing? How did you feel when this happened? Right? I remember that in my undergrad, being, as my extra burden was, I had to educate, give insights. What's going on with Kendrick Lamar? Why is that important? Right? Like, how many people I've actually answered that question many a time. A lot of my good friends who are like, I don't get it. Like, I don't get it. And so it's the work, right? The extra work on top of the work, made heavier in COVID crisis, made heavier in the Black Lives Summer, made heavier with attacks on Black women, unveiled attack on Black women as the picture children of DEI, when that is just crazy. The facts don't even support it, right? The facts are not with them on that. Like I love, people calling Kamala Harris. I was like, you can call her many things, but underqualified is not one of them. And it's a continuation of a conversation they were having about Hillary Clinton being underqualified, right, in the face of the last time. And so, when the foundation no requirement excludes you, then it's important to know that you're with people who have a personal commitment to not allowing that to be so, right? And so people who tell you, I don't know if you've heard it before, it's like, we don't have to agree to be friends. Those are not people who are safe for Black students to be around, right? Because if you disagree with me, on certain things, then it's not. We can't be friends. Like I'm clear on certain things, right? Does anybody feel that, or is it just me? So personal commitment matters, and I think that's a piece that there. And so, in your experience, I know you know, I asked you to search for a moment to think about where a student discovered something about what you do personally, your volunteerism, your service, and how it changed that relationship for you. You could think on it for a bit, but
Well, I think as a professor, it has many different implications. It usually comes out in your teaching. Who you are should come out in your teaching. And I appreciate the rigor because I'm very much a nerdy scientist, psychologist. I love that part. But there's also aspects to life. And so I think the highest compliment is some of my students went surfing with me. And then eventually, one of them, she started her own surf school. I used to go to the Black Student Union meeting at Long Beach State, and I'd say, hey, the Black Surfers Collective is having free lessons. If y'all are interested, come. And eventually, one of them did. And she loved it so much she has started her own surf school. Now she don't surf that much, but she loves the community of people coming together and getting together. And it feels like the extension of the BSU from Long Beach State now up and down the state. So and they travel all the way down to San Diego, up to Central California, and make connections that way with this Soulfly Surf School. Um, but yeah, seeing that commitment beyond just the classroom in different ways, and that's kind of an abstract way because I just kind of mentioned it offhand handed out a flyer. I think the other piece is my connection with the Association of Black Psychologists and students who I've mentored from high school all the way through the doctoral level who've gotten involved with the Association of Black Psychologists that really changed their understanding that there's a whole professional organization dedicated to not just anti-racism, which is important, but also affirming Blackness and thinking about how you build not just for now or even 5 years, but for 50 years, even 100 years to either reconstruct or deconstruct and or just build to be building because that's what people do, and reclaim our humanity in that process. So yeah.
I think it's important. I think it's an important piece that is not, I mean, let's be clear, most professors are not taught how to teach. That's one of our foundational challenges to the work that we do, right? And so I think that what I'm trying to do is to
Not even in the College of Education, scary enough.
right. It's true, and I think it's a foundational flaw, right? It exists there because we're here to rigor, we're not here to teach, right? And so it's this misidentification of the core part of our job. And so the things that came out from the conversations with the students are really things that are foundational to teaching, right? If you don't know who the students are in front of you, you can't know how to show up for them. You don't know your audience. How are you going to perform for your audience, right? If you don't know the resources for them, then you're forced to either be the resource for them or to every time a crisis comes up, you're forced to go find the answer to that. And that's a huge taxation on you if you're not prepared ahead of time. It's a huge taxation to have to come up with resources in terms of programmatic or individual. And then the personal commitment piece is a piece that's, you know, it's not about changing who you are, right? It's really just finding, once you know who they are, finding the thing that you do that you think will connect with them and their experience, right? And sometimes it comes from, for me, I hold office hours not just to support my students, but also to be able to understand what's going on in my class, what's going on in the ethos of the whole classroom, what is the focus in this moment, you know, to find out like when we were traversing back to school to find out if they're ready to be back in a classroom yet. A lot of the students had hyper anxiety around sharing space. Some people are over it. Some of them are not, right? And so so to understand from them where they are. So I think that that's the piece in terms of what we're learning about how we teach better through understanding how we serve better. And so, through the example of Black students doing this work unapologetically, hopefully we get some best practices they can take to other elements. The fifth thing we have is it's important to acknowledge, investigate, and fight current and historical systemic obstacles for your students to be successful. In particular, looking at your particular department, right? I think in particular, if you're thinking as a faculty, say like, all right, what are the demographics for our students? How are our Black students matriculating versus other students, right? To understand your demographics. Why? Because it helps you see students when you understand it, like, oh, I can acknowledge there's something going on here, right? There's something going on here that don't necessarily make sense. Same teachers teaching, students, you know, getting different results, right? So is it an issue with preparation on their side? Is it an issue with how we're showing up? But I think acknowledging that, and that's what I mean when I say acknowledging systemic racism. I think that when they hear systemic racism, some people get really like, oh, you're saying that all white people are bad. I was like, well, that sounds like some personal guilt you got going on there because I didn't say none of that, right? All I said is that the system is set up in a way that is set up, right? And so we have to look at it and say, like, oh, how is this thing running when we're doing things as normal, which is not meritocracy, never was meritocracy, right? We never had that system. When you had a college for farmers, when you begin to teach people who are not farmers, that college was not set up in a way for non-farmers. It was just systemically built to serve people who are farmers, right? So that makes sense, right? That's the way we evolved. Institutions evolved out of a specific set of students they were serving. And now that student section has shifted. And in California, y'all, it's big time shifted. We have a different group of students who are showing up than before. And what they're looking to get out of it is different. And so I think acknowledging the fact that your department, that your school, it's not serving these students is a great way to begin fixing it, right? The best step to do it. And so I know that sometimes it's sort of connected with failure, right? If you acknowledge sort of that it's not done, and I think that that's a sort of a negative way to look at it. I think that it's really not about that. It's like I want to win more than I want to be right. Right. And I think that that's where we have to turn the corner. And I think turning that corner requires us to acknowledge if the system is not serving us well. Now, when it's killing it, there are some schools and departments that are doing great. Right. And so to lift that up as well. So I think those things are important. And then the last piece that I got from them, it was to have, is to create explicit, enthusiastic, and exclusive spaces for Black students in your classroom. Uh, it is awesome that within your curriculum, you create exclusive, enthusiastic, and explicitly Black spaces. And same can be said for all the diverse students who exist in your world. For you to figure out a way to, at least at one moment in your classroom, to say, hey, here are the queer contributions to this particular scholarship, right? I just want to put that out there. It's here. I see it. When a student hears that in the classroom, it changes who you are, it changes who they are, to see that you took the time to integrate them in there, even if it's on a Monday, week 15, right? Or the Tuesday, week 6. You hear yourself, you're like, man, all right, that's it. This is for me. So these are the things that we heard from our students. So these are the 6 principles, which is knowing who your students are, knowing which programs are there to serve them, understanding who the folks are who are there to serve them, who see them, having a personal commitment to the things that are challenging their existence. Anti-Black racism is the thing that is challenging Black folks on our campuses. Acknowledge and investigate the challenges, the systemic challenges within your sphere that you're a part of. And lastly, creating a space within your classroom to explicitly, enthusiastically, and exclusively serve Black students. So that's what we got. Where we at in terms of time, sir? I see you.
12:35.
12:35. All right, so I'm right on time. All right, all right. That is how we go. So we're gonna let's give 5 minutes for a quick Q&A because we get the 5 minutes back from Will. So anybody got any questions that came out of this or comments? You feel moved? Because remember, what are our goals? What are the 3 things I'm trying to accomplish today? Value storytelling. Is that? I'm trying to go through. I was like, was that on my list? Where I have? So it is. Yep. All right. All right. So we're trying to share the BEP. What we're about. So I want y'all to get the feel and to see what Black excellence is about. I want you to engage in this conversation. We did that. We killed that. And then I wanted to identify and engage people who are like, man, I like the way that felt. I like the way that looked. I like the way it sounded. I want to be a part of being an ambassador to bring that work here. So that's what we're trying to do, right? That's what we're going. So with that in mind, what do you got? How are we doing on that task? Or do you think we're moving on that at all? How do y'all feel? Do y'all feel like y'all know a little bit more about Black Excellence Project? Awesome. Awesome. Did you like the conversation we had there? Was that? All right. All right. So y'all ready? Y'all ready to get involved? That's the last piece. We're looking for you. We're looking for you.
All right.
There we go.
All right.
I'm Dr. Richardson.
I'm gonna get you on mic so that way we'll get it recorded for you.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Greg Richardson. I'm in the College of Education, the Watson College of Education. Not necessarily in defense, but in clarification on professors and learning how to teach. The College of Education teaches teachers, and we have also practicums in addition to our clinicals that we do in the classroom. The practicums, we have supervisors that go into the classroom where the new teachers are and actually critique, mentor them to help them in that particular area. My experience in the university, I realized coming from a STEMS program that teachers may be expert in their subject matters, but not necessarily great teachers. They have to be taught, most professors. But I wanted to say this, is that I'm glad, Professor Cleveland, that you mentioned the importance of connecting with the students. As a Black man, many times I was the only Black man in the STEM programs and even in the educational programs that I was in. But one of the things I found out was that my fellow Black individuals, they were not connected to their past. For instance, in considering the importance of education, our ancestors that were brought here to the Americas, many times people don't realize that they came here with phenomenal skills. Before IKEA came into existence, we had the capability to put together wood structures without nails, but people aren't taught this. And our mathematical backgrounds are extensive. Our agricultural backgrounds are extensive, just to name a few. So what we think we need to do is to inform people that are in the colleges and universities of the rich background that we have as a Black people, even in the area of administration and government. Phenomenal contributions to society, warfare, you just go on and on. But these things are not being told to the public, and also many Black people are deprived of having this knowledge also. So I applaud what Black Excellence Project is actually doing, but I think we can do more also. Thank you.
I love that. So let's give him a hand. That was an awesome, awesome insight. Two things that came out of that for me. First of all, yes, at the core of what we do in Black Excellence Project is we tell stories. So we share the stories of our students present to inspire the stories of our students' future, right? So that's super important. And so, yes, love it and love to have you with us fighting the fight to let people know what we're trying to do and how we move. Other piece I want to be very clear is it was him talking about the education department. All right, I was more generally talking about people in other disciplines who do not teach. So, sir,
Yeah. Well, I can respond to that or even kind of go with that. I know of one program, the University of Southern California, that did have a professorship pathway that was very particular in teaching doctoral level students how to be professors. But not many places do that. I think some universities do a good job of saying, entering or junior faculty is what they call them. We're going to work with you to become better instructors. But that's not always the priority, especially in R1 institutions or institutions that want to be R1 institutions, or research is the primary deal there, if we're talking about R1 institutions. So,
Not CSU.
um, well, I some of them tend to emphasize the research more than the teaching. So in between, and I have some really great colleagues who've kind of worked on that. One of them is Angela Locks over at USC, but many universities have university research opportunity programs where faculty are still emphasizing their research, but they're connecting with undergraduate students about their research. And sometimes the undergraduate isn't necessarily helping with the research, but they're having a conversation about it. And it makes the faculty more relevant, and it promotes a better relationship with students. So they have a better sense of what they're doing in the classroom as well. So there's opportunities there. Dr. Angela Locks is a Black faculty member, and she's done an outstanding job of bringing together students and faculty around research. And I think that's a big opportunity that we miss. I will also say that there is, and going along right with what you're saying, there is at least 60 years of Black themed literature and journals, whether it's the Journal of Black Psychology, over 100 years of the Journal of Negro Education, Journal of Africana Studies, or Journal of Pan-African Studies. And I can keep going on with these different journals that have put together the science that we need in order to better understand ourselves and the rest of the world. What I find is that many faculty members, especially if they are not engaged in Black organizations, they don't read those journals at all. And I've gone to all Black audiences of faculty members and asked, and I turn around and I say, how many have actually read the Journal of Black Studies in the last 3 years? Zero hands go up, or two or three because they wrote in that journal. Then everybody else, the rest of the audience, their hands aren't going up. So we're not even utilizing our own stuff, our own science, our own history, our own knowledge and information. We need to do that. And we need to, for those of us who are ambassadors for this Black cause, we need to be models of that. And so that's why I name drop a lot of stuff that I read. One, I struggled in reading as a kid. But two, Frederick Douglass, his quote, and I'm paraphrasing, once I learned to read, I was unfit to be a slave. Knowledge moves us in a very different direction. And so continuing to stay up on that knowledge is extremely important.
And I think sort of what my critique is that, or it's really a critique, of institutional critique, right? The issue is not that professors don't want to do better, it's that we don't train them to do better per se, that we don't see them as their foundational work to see their students. So that when we ask you to see Black students, it feels like an extra burden because ain't nobody ever asked me to see any students. What do you what do you mean see Black students? I don't see any of them. How so foundationally, what we're advocating for is a different system. When again, we're not providing information they can't find anymore, then really what we're providing is that interpersonal relationship, that relationship with the material that they're out there trying to learn and study, right? And that's really the piece that makes me excited about what I'm doing. I'm telling y'all, I am the only one who got juiced. I was like, man, I got to use everything I learned my whole life now. We at war. I was like, it's so cool to know. Like, I get to be able to be here. And it's like, if I can't defend it, it's like I can't believe in Jesus and not be able to defend it. Like, I was always got frustrated. I go home and I tell people about what I learned in my African history book. And they were like, see, this is making you not believe in Jesus. I was like, if God cannot, if he can't stand up against a history book, then your God is weak. I was like, my God can stand to that, right? And so this idea is that like what we're doing in terms of serving Black folks is good for the institution. It's about developing best practices that should then go on to other people. We have been tastemakers for years about ways to best serve communities, from free lunches to to the way we approach this thing. I am so excited about it. So to me, I'm enthusiastic about this moment. We get to refine what we do. We get to I feel like we get to be unapologetically Black because we have carried everybody's stuff for a long time, but to survive this moment, we need y'all to make it through. So we need y'all to tell us what we need to do, what we need to focus on, how we need to come. That's what this is about for me. Is like providing a chance for y'all to talk, and the university is going to get to see. We're going to have these wonderful testimonials. That's going to be great. Check off. But we actually going to listen to what they said too, right? And then we're going to take those best practices that emerge from them. They're going to tell us where the assets are, not the places we're spending the most money on campus, but the places that are delivering results for them. And that to me gets me excited. So I am excited about where we are. And I want to hear, do any students have any questions before we transition to talking to our students? Anything? Questions, comments? There's no real pressure on you. Y'all get all funky when y'all feel like it's pressure. It ain't a pressure. We're just talking and we care about you.
But when you said some professors, how did you say some professors teach, but it's like they need to be trained how to teach. Is that what you said? Did I word that correctly?
I think that's
Nope, not to be disrespectful.
No, no, yeah, that's part of it. I think they know how to teach what they do, but
Yes,
they don't necessarily know how to teach other people what they do.
exactly.
They're expert in a particular subject.
That stuck out to me because as a student, like sometimes, we sit around and talk about certain things that we're like, what are we learning? Like, why are we learning this? So that is a really that was everything what you said. Because that I was just like, oh my God, I have a professor just like that. And I never thought there was a certain way that it worked like that. So that makes so much sense to me.
And to be clear, it's probably just not for you.
Yeah.
Right? That's the other part of the game, is to understand that sometimes it's not for you. I taught my daughter, who is a junior at UCLA now, and I was like, all right, just understand that we're humans teaching you, right? And that we all have preferences of how we communicate and learn and how we were taught and learned. And so I was like, go to office hours and get to know their humanity. And you'll find that a grumpy professor who you always didn't get, you'll understand through the thing that they say to you about their values that may help you uh, understand them better. But the thing I'm encouraging for professors is to share what's about you, to share something personal, to share something you're passionate about, to give a little bit of yourself, because that vulnerability allows for students to then connect with your humanity in a way that didn't say, hey, professor, when you said that, it didn't make no sense, right? To build a relationship where you've been in community with your professors in a way where they're like, hey, and I am a community with my students, and a couple of them will come to me like, hey, that didn't make no sense. Why did you do that? What did you say when you said that? Like you cut off before, you know what I mean? You made it, whatever. So that sort of relationship's important. When I realized that what I'm doing is not perfection, it is being perfected, right? And that I am there to hold space, I am there to provide tools, but I am not there to teach you per se. That's not what we do anymore. I'm not giving you, I'm saying, hey, here's the space, we're going to go. Here are all the tools needed to get here. I can, some of those tools are rhetorical tools, right? That's an important thing to understand. So some of the rhetorical tools are saying, here's what winning looks like, right? So if you're going to be an expert, in particular when you're doing STEM stuff, right? Here's the where we're going with this, right? But there are 10,000 ways to get there. Everything that we do, right? So I'm gonna tell you the best practice that I've observed. These are the ones that the book recommends, right? But hey, you may be able to get there in a different way. So teach me if you can get there in a different way, right? And that's what I want. Like students who are out there journeying there are better students. They're learning more. If they're able to, I'm challenging you. I'm going to find, and to be encouraged to do so, not to feel like, oh, he didn't say nothing, but he's the boss, so it must be me, right? But then to also understand that sometimes, uh, sorry, professors, y'all, sometimes y'all have groupthink go on. Y'all start talking to each other about stuff, and y'all all wrong. But then y'all get the confirmation, right? Confirmation bias. They be like, oh yeah, that didn't make no sense. Yep. That's right. That's the problem. Couldn't be me, right? And so sometimes that happens as well. So you have to also be self-aware and be able to sort of, tap in and so anyway, it's a conversation. But thank you so much for engaging that. So what I want to do before we transition now is I want you all within the audience to have a conversation. Right? So I would love for any of you who have mentored before to share a moment where you shared something personal with a mentee, sort of like we talked about here, where it changed the relationship with them. It allowed you to sort of go deeper with them. So think about that, mentors, any mentors out there, and share that. And so find somebody to share that with. Find a young person to grab and share that with. And while we do that, we're going to say goodbye to Brandon. Let's give him a hand. And we're going to have our students come up after we get that moment. So we're going to come out and do it too. So we'll have you come up. All right. So a moment where you shared something that changed the relationship. You, Michelle. Erin, how you with me?
Um, so I'm sharing the moment.
Sure. Let's get a moment. Here, one moment, but I used to go to picnics in my best friend's dad. I showed up. I was in your class, right? So it was just this moment that we shared, the fact that we actually had come to the picnic together for like the last decade, but we had a different relationship. So it was just
Look at it as,
oh, wow. It's like so every time that I'm into that's
sharing your back.
in a different way.
Nice. 11 years. So,
That kind of
are you still in contact with him, or?
I see him every night. He was dating my best friend's niece. And when they stopped dating, I stopped seeing them.
That's it.
I didn't see him. He didn't come out.
Well, one of the things that came to mind was something I shared.
It's pretty cool.
Mhm.
Student I was working.
All right. You can share. You want to share?
Sure. They would have-
You don't have to, I know you want to share with us. That's not good.
From now on. They just thought they were kind of shared it. So, you have.
You know Kathy Butcher? No, no. She was a student here.
Okay.
And she was having a challenge. Seeing herself as a young Black woman. Yeah,
I know it's
all of
5
us
years, of course.
at the time, the orientation department was ran
This is that.
white.
I'm trying to share with you is you have skills that you haven't tapped into. So
And the values are
regardless of
very
what your
interesting.
difficulties are right
And
now.
I was hearing about some of the conflicts trying to come space. And me personal information that really doesn't kind of come in everyday conversation, but one thing that kind of open up the door and it being other than how do I do that, like how there's yeah, it's always there's you always put something like that.
Yes. Right.
So I think that is important to break it down. So whichever or students may have, but then also add a little share to the journey, not go so and let them understand that, you're just I've been there. And I was like, how to be the kind not to like think that you said, and where you're at. But you're gonna have to code switch. You gotta have to
That's interesting. So anyway,
to kind of flow with what.
take a look at it.
She was.
First, you're gonna have to-
Thinking about there with my work. And so I think that's right now before she does like I have a lot of that. Still I was like, well, I don't think what I know. Taylor from the beginning to that is like, yeah. Because they don't, and I think some of the students who actually have that work. But I'm gonna
Candles, Asian food. I saw very few people
show up.
like me.
So I think it's just for both of us, walk out. Okay, what is it? Be unapologetic, but no, that I'm going to have it. Sometimes, like.
But you know your experience.
And to show her your humanity, right? Because I think that there's this image that we have to be perfect.
Right,
I graduated in third time.
No, we're struggling and imperfect.
right.
No, you
We
have.
don't want them.
Yeah.
No, but when you get like, you don't go.
We're gonna get another film this afternoon, but thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Pleasure,
Yeah.
man.
I'm gonna,
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and introduce our student panel. Because they're all outstanding students who work at the Office of Black Student Success. So all the way on the end, I have Zandra Vaughn, who's a social work student in the master's program. Tristan Gilliam,
For coming.
Gillum, yes, Tristan Gillum, computer science major, yes. Yeah. Now, Rita Thornton, I know you see all the time, but I'm blinking on your major right now. Finance. Okay, I knew it was business, but definitely finance. All right, outstanding students, all three. Now they said they were a little nervous, but I said, look, you're answering the student perspective. It's been 31 years since I graduated from college. I'm well away from that student perspective. Y'all are going to be able to give us some good insights about your experience. So we're excited to hear that. All right, basically.
Awesome, awesome. So we're gonna just pass the mic down. It's really not gonna be about anything too crazy. I did this research, right? And I found that these are the 6 points that students kept saying over and over again in different ways, right? This is the things they were saying. So I just wanted to see from you all, does this thing resonate for you? Are these things important? Are these, are there things that are not on the list that are more important to you? That's really what I want to hear. So there's nothing crazy. I'm just sharing, sharing what your thoughts are. And because I'm about to go and sit down and break my pen out and take notes. And y'all can guide us on how to implement this thing. So I'm right over here in the front row.
All right, so bear with me. I don't talk on stage like that. But one of the things that resonated with me was where you said students ask for their professors to see them. And that means a lot to me as a student because sometimes we tend to feel as though we're just a number in the crowd or our name on a quiz. Because sometimes I love when a professor remembers my name. Once that professor remembers my name, I'm gonna remember that professor forever because I've literally walked up to professors. I've been in their classes like twice, and they don't remember me, and I'm like, Professor, like Rita, and then I see professors now, the other ones that I connect with, and they're like Rita, and I'm like Professor, and then the roles get reversed. And I'm like, I have to remember his or her name. And then also when they see you, you feel more comfortable. You feel more comfortable coming to them and explaining to them like, hey, I don't know what you were talking about in that lecture, or I didn't understand it. Because sometimes when we want to reach out and we go there and we're like, hey, so this and that, whatever formula, a bunch of my classes are like formulas and stuff like that I have to solve. I get lost. I'm like, the numbers confuse me and they start jumping around. And then if the professor isn't comfortable, if you're not comfortable with that professor, you don't know how to ask him. You're gonna be like, sometimes I'll be like, dumb question, professor, but what was this? And if they don't make me comfortable, they'll be like, what do you mean, what is this? And that's where I'm like, never mind. I'll figure it out on my own. But if I'm comfortable enough to go and be like, hey, so this is where I started, this is where I ended up at, I can I can in the end succeed or get to a point where I can find a way to find that solution. And that's why I want the professors to see me not just as a number in the crowd, a part of like just a trail of people walking. No, see me because I learn differently. I will come to your office hours, and if you don't give me just that piece of light, just that piece of knowledge, I'm not going to come back. I'm going to go somewhere else, and I'm going to find someone else who I talk to or who I like or who I can deal with and just get that information. And I just want, just see me. That's all.
Awesome. Awesome. I love that.
Well, let's see. I think what resonated with me the most throughout the lecture was like the professor's ability to teach someone to teach, basically. Like, and just throughout like my academic life, it's like I've always, even through like, because I've been homeschooled all the way through high school from eighth grade to graduation. So I've not really, I've always been able to be someone that could teach myself to teach sometimes, but like that is kind of the issue though with some professors where it's like you it's like they're trying to like help you, but it's like it's important to be able to break down the content for the student to understand, that is like the core thing because you could be an expert on anything. You could be an expert in math, you can be an expert in geology or anything like that, but the key thing is to be able to come down at a low level or at least at the student's level to get them to understand. And I've kind of had that issue though, like not just like through homeschool and some periods being in campus, where it's like I have to help myself sometimes because it's like not all professors or teachers can just help me just understand things, and it's like it can be difficult, and even now is like I have to find a way to help myself or fend for myself when it comes to analyzing or breaking down information, especially math, you know? And there was a point in my life where I hated math, but now I love it. I don't know. Just my left brain unlocked. I don't know. And it's very underrated to have the ability to teach someone because when we think of teaching, I feel like we get a chalk and point at the board and be like, "What's 2 plus 2? What's 4 plus 5?" You're really educating someone when you're teaching. When you teach, you're educating someone. You're opening a person's mind to something new. And I think we got too caught up with the details of like teaching, just as a whole. And I think once we just learn more about the ability to teach or to educate, I think a lot professors and students and everyone would just be really better off. And I guess that's it.
No, I like it. Thank you. Thank you. Give him a hand. Yes, thank you. No, I think and just acknowledging what you're saying. It's you know, I think for professors to hear, we're not advocating that you don't know what you're doing, so we need to come in and help you. I think it's understanding that intellect is not the only teaching, right? That if you don't feel that they see you physically in front of them, when I say see you, I'm not even saying it like some spiritual, like, oh, see me, or some woke sort of, now, no, literally is seeing me, knowledge of my humanity. Like, oh, like you are Rita. You know what I mean? Like I acknowledge you, and I know I saw you 2 weeks ago, and you had trouble with this problem. So when I see you, I'm like, hey, did you ever figure that problem out? When you have that moment that he made you see them, that is powerful. Like, and it ain't about that. Doesn't mean you still may not know how to communicate a concept to them. You know, they still may get stuck on some moments because that's just education, right? That's the way it is. We learn differently sometimes. So sometimes someone's a visual learner, and I can tell them, and they won't understand, or they're an auditory learner, and I can show them, and they still don't get it, right? So I think part of it is acknowledging, and that's what I say the danger of not teaching teachers how to teach is to understand that like who your audience is impacts your ability. That I can get a great, and this happened, I've taught the same class online, which means the exact same class. And I've gotten great reviews from one class, horrible reviews from another class, teaching the exact same class, right? And so, you know, so it's not all about intellectual stuff. It is a reflection of my inability to connect with that class and to understand that there was something going on in that class that I missed. Maybe it was a Q&A, something posted and I didn't respond. And so the fellow classmates responded. And that found in their head like, oh, he doesn't know, or he doesn't want to get back, or whatever, right? So there could be things that happen. And so for me, the idea of taking ownership of not just the intellectual process, but also how y'all feel about it, right? Even if how you feel may not be connected to facts, right, per se, right? And so that is, yeah. So thank you so much for sharing. And Rita, I got you. I got you. Go ahead.
Kind of both. I feel the same way. And especially like Rita said, just being seen. Like sometimes I guess I could be annoying, but like I try to make sure the professor sees me if I have to go up there and say, hey, because there are some questions that I feel like I really want to answer to that are kind of like far fetched or a lot of students are uncomfortable to ask, but I'm the one to ask. So I like really I can't I'm gonna be thinking about it. I need this answer. And I'm gonna make you see me so you can see that I am in your class to know that I do learn differently. These are different things that I may struggle with, that I may need help with. I had a professor, his name, I'm not gonna say his name, but he was reading this book and the book was really old. It was a really old book, but it seemed like I guess because of the curriculum, the way it was, he he had to tie it into social work, and it was extremely confusing. And I've never been in a situation where I didn't understand it. So I went up there and I said, Professor, I don't understand anything you just said or what you're teaching me because I needed to be honest. I really don't get it. And he was like, you'll get it. I still didn't get it, but I wanted him to understand, like, I'm not getting this, and I kind of, I would get distracted most of the time because I really wasn't getting it and I wasn't the only student feeling that way. But I needed him to understand, look, if I failed this paper, I really tried my best, so being seen, I think, and being a black woman, like I think most of my classes I am the only black woman. There's only one of me. So like I feel like I can easily be missed. And I teach my son that you got to be seen. You guys gonna see my son in this classroom. And
Mm.
again, what was it again? The what? Oh yeah, the teachers. I we like I said, we have conversations about it as students. Like, you know, not it's not tying into what we think should be taught, but like the way that they're teaching is you pretty much explained it to the T with the teaching. So yeah.
Well, I think, thank you so much for sharing. Let's give her a hand. It's always exciting. It's a vulnerable space being up there. I appreciate y'all. One of the things I'll say to all of y'all, as a suggestion, and I don't know, I'm in the moment, so I, try to stay on our topic, but it's be clear what winning looks like before you talk to your professors. I'm gonna say this again. Don't go talk to your professor until you're a clear sense of what winning is looking like for you. What are you trying to get out of this interaction, right? And because a lot of the things for me is when I deal with a student and I feel that winning for them looks like, I told him, and that's not a very constructive conversation, right? It's no, like, but if I come and then say, hey, I just want you to know that I'm here. I told my daughter, first conversation you have with the professor, the only thing they need to know is you want an A. Hi, my name is blah, 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 and I'm working to get an A. So if you see me getting off course, just let me know. Thank you. Right? Now that is clarity about what winning looks like. Now you got an ally. First of all, in terms of knowing your name, it takes a while for people to get out. You got a lot of people in your class. It's easy to lose people, right? But the person that came to my office hour every day, every office hour, I remember all of my people with office hours, right? If am I in an online class, the one student that has their camera on every day, who's camera ready every day, who asks questions every day, I remember those students, right? You don't have to say nothing else. Just speaking and being present and showing up matters. So be clear about what winning looks like when you go in and talk to your professors, right? That's an important piece with when you're approaching, and I appreciate what I heard. So being to go through the principles a bit, them knowing who you are important, right? Got that. Um, let's talk about the programmatic and the people part of it, right? How helpful would it be to have not just your Black professors, not just your ethnic studies professors, not just your advisor, but to have all professors have knowledge about where you could go and find community? Like, how would that change your lived experience here if he was like, hey, the National Society of Black Engineer, they're trying to launch on the campus. Did you know this happening tomorrow or today? How awesome would it be, or how different? I get to frame that. And I'm sorry, I didn't do it. I wouldn't pass IRB with that. But how how would that impact your experience if you had professors who knew the haps?
Um, I I think it would help us be more like more successful in a so like I was a transfer student, so I didn't go 4 years. I transferred here from San Bernardino Valley College and then I moved over here. And it's a huge campus. It was a little overwhelming my first semester because it was like, oh my gosh, all these buildings. It's like was like, how I find my classes, because I had a class over at Global Building, and I had a class at Jack Brown, and I had a class at University Hall, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And I didn't partake in anything. I just came here, did school, ate, and I would go home because I'm like, oh my gosh, it just felt so overwhelming. And I kind of wanted to lock myself in because I was a born introvert. I slowly like worked on myself to get a little more extrovert and speak and, you know, socialize. So my my inherent my inherent want was to like knock myself away and like hide and just like stay home, do what I had to do and then leave. But I felt like if I had professors that were like, oh hey, so there's like a black event happening, you should come, or just an event happening where they were like, yeah, you guys should definitely come and check it out. I feel like I would have probably socialized more in my first semester here than like just running away from it because I felt like it was just a lot. This is just a whole new environment, and I feel like having events like these and future ones would help future students become more acclimatized
Acclimated.
yeah,
What you
acclimated to the college environment.
like it? Like it. So how would that impact? The question was, how would it impact you if you had professors all around knowing what's going on so you could get connected into your community?
Well, I could definitely say that if I had more professors that alerted me about board events, I would definitely have my networking skills up to par, definitely. And since I've been dormant here, my networking skills have gotten a lot better since, I live in dorm here year round. So I would be able to meet new people, I could network, and I don't know, I would definitely be open to a lot more opportunities too that would probably advance me further towards my career goals in life, definitely. And probably meet new friends along the way too. That's also something. But mostly networking.
Mm.
Because it's like when I'm at different events, I learn new things as well. But mostly I'm just personally like since I've been on campus, I've heard of a lot like I've heard of a lot more different kinds of scholarships, different projects, just different things that go on campus. And I feel like if I had more professors that let me know about different events more, um, it would help a lot, definitely.
Perfect, perfect. I don't know if you want to get in on that. Just no, you don't have to, but
I just like help build a community around me within on campus and have closer people and friends. I might need my hair done, somebody might be from out of state, or different things like that.
amen to that. That's a simple stuff. So I'm gonna keep you up here. I'm gonna see if the audience has any questions for our young ones. Do you have any questions for them? If not, all right, sure.
You guys are doing great. So my name is Robin Phillips. I'm VP of HR here on our campus, and I think I have more of a statement. I just want to say you don't have to try to be seen. You're seen. You're a minority amongst minorities. That means when you walk in, you automatically stand out, right? So I just want to say that. But I also would like to get a better sense of what does it actually feel like when you confirm that you feel seen, and what do you do when you're not feeling seen, right? Do you, because what you some of you just described is that you sort of become introverted, right? And you said Rita mentioned that Rita goes, oh no, well, I'll just figure it out on my own, right? And that's a little bit scary. So I think I'm just more processing what you students are saying. And in some ways, I'm just trying to figure out how do we do a better job at making sure that when you go in there, there's a certain essence that you have that nobody else has. And that's power. So how do we help these students sort of harness that power that that you have innately because of what we've all gone through in this country as African Americans? So I just want to say good job to you all.
Most definitely. I don't know if you have any responses to that. The question was, how do you react to feeling safe versus not feeling safe? I think that's what I took away as sort of the core of it. So
So how do I react when I'm not feeling seen? Sometimes it depends on the professor. I don't know, sometimes I'll get real quiet. I'll start raising my hand. I'll just be like, let me just be quiet because, he don't see me. I'll just be like, let me just let it go. And then when I feel seen, I start asking questions. Hey, this is something I really want to ask. I start to learn the material more. I start to pay attention more. And when I'm not seen, I kind of like close in and stay back. Like, okay.
Okay, so this brought back to me, my mom used to always tell me, they could rob you of all your physical possessions, but your knowledge. And I'm big on like learning new things. And I realized throughout my entire college career that when I wasn't feeling seen, like during my earlier, when I first started university, um, I was kind of, bunking on my knowledge. I was like, well, if I got a C, I get a C. I mean, I've been an A student all my life. I had a 4.0 once upon a time, I'm like a 3 something. But that was because I was like locking myself away and I was just like, well, I don't care since they don't care. They don't care about me, I don't care about them. And then it became a form of self-sabotage. And I look back at it and I'm like, dang, I probably shouldn't have done that. But it was just a learning curve for me. I'm like, okay, you know what?
It's almost like if you're not gonna love me, I'm gonna love myself. And that's what I figured out. And that's why I'm like, when I say I wanted them to see me, I want them to see other students too, because I don't want them to self-sabotage like I did. Because we're here to learn, we're here to grow our knowledge, and knowledge is something that cannot be stolen from you. But if you don't feel like the people giving you that knowledge cares about giving you that knowledge, it's almost like you don't even want to receive it.
Hey, man, so I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
I most certainly agree with all that she just said. As far as feeling seen, honestly, it's not something I gave much thought. I mean, I gave it some thought, but especially like during high school and things like that, it's not something I thought too much about. If I wanted to be seen, I will email my professor and I'll be like, hey, I need help with this and I need help with that and the third. And I need you. Also, when it comes to not feeling seen, um, again, it's not something I care too much about being seen. I think the in my logic, honestly, if I'm the only person that sees me, I feel like that's good enough for me, to be honest, because other people aren't going to always see what kind of person you are. They're not going to always see or notice the way you analyze or learn things. Some do and some don't. And honestly, that's okay. But the important thing is to me, just what I've learned throughout my academic and personal life, just all as a whole, is that I know my strengths and I know my weaknesses, not just academically, but just in general. And I know what I need to do to improve. And as long as I know how to improve myself or what I need to avoid doing to not be in a bad path or whatever, I think that is the most important thing, not just to me, but other people too, you know. And I guess that's it.
I want to say, yeah, I think that self-love, yeah, but to be clear, people are being paid to teach you. That is their job. So your resilience is awesome. Your self-determination is awesome. But, and I want to say this too to you faculty out there who have a chance to see this. I understand that you are also committed to teaching them and that sometimes it is a institutional issue of not preparing them to be able to show up for our students in the way they need. So when I developed this idea of having a conversation about how to address Black students in crisis, it was not saying that like all Black folks are going to need crisis support work, right? But it's just saying that like in order to get there are things we have to do to establish a human connection, right? And that thing that for Black students that I hear for them, it's seeing who they are, it's knowing where the resources are. That's the easiest way to connect with them. Here are the people, here are the programs that can work for you. It's about sharing your own personal bit of how you fight anti-Black racism. So a lot of folks, all folks, 80, 90% of the folks, even if they are voting for Trump, don't consider themselves racist. So they're not intentionally trying to be racist, right? And so the reality is that if you can articulate, then how then are you walking that path? How do you check and balance yourself to make sure you don't slip into that? And then you can share that part of your humanity with these students. It helps them know that they're safe in that way. Or you know, help you work on getting better at sharing the truth. One of the other things will happen. Um, so I think that's an important piece to get if you're a faculty member who are trying to better serve Black students to understand that. To acknowledge the fact that systems are set up and that, hey, I looked and I saw how Black students are doing in this class. Like to say, well, wow, I don't know how you're on this campus, but for our campus, DFWs are higher for Black students across the board, but in particular in a couple of classes. And a lot of them are GE classes that are required for them to matriculate for. So there's a number of courses that are responsible for bouncing a very large number of Black students. And I bet you a lot of those professors don't even know who their students are, and they don't understand the systemic issues, the fact that this is happening to all this group, right? And so that data piece would allow them to sort of be able to take it in. Not saying it requires you to make a move. Once you know, then you have to move. And then the last piece that I love to lift up is having a plan to sort of be able to welcome people when they come to class and say, I got a space for you, right? I got a space for you. Maybe in the back around the corner, like, you know, we only got a 2-bedroom house and it's 12 of y'all here, but I got a space for you. And that's the way you have to make people feel. And what I think that our job is to do, an asset-based approach says, I am not here to tear down teachers. I'm here to provide resources so they could better achieve their goals. Why? Because most professors I talk to want to be good at what they do. They want students to succeed, to love, and embrace what they do. So if we can give a set of skills around these principles, which I'm not hearing an objection to from our young ones, right? We're okay. Right? These are our guiding principles. If we can do this, it will change the world for them. Just seeing who they are, knowing the demographics, just knowing where the stuff is, to be able to like, hey girl, do you know you can get your hair cut here? Or here's a flyer. You know, we got this list of things for you. You're new to this campus. Yeah, I saw you. You're the only Black transfer student we have here this year, right? You're in my class. It's just being aware of those things and understanding part of teaching is knowing your audience. And if you know your audience and you can make these interpersonal connections, it changes the experience. And so if we as an institution are really about the business of Black student success, then we have to be about the business of Black student stories. We got to know their stories. And so that is the work that we are sort of embarking on here. And so I'm going to let you go with your thought, and then we have our wrap up thing we're doing. But do you have something you want to add, sis?
No, but you guys are awesome.
I love it.
Good conversation.
I love it. All right. So I am one for ending on appreciation, right? And so I generally like to, whatever I do a thing, to end on appreciation. It's something my mom always would did. She said, you always have something. So I would like us all to take a bit of a moment, right? And we're going to hear from everybody. We have such a small group. And so we're going to all share something that we appreciated here. Maybe a story that was shared, you know, maybe whatever it could be. There's no right or wrong answer to it. But so we're going to take a small minute, take 30 seconds. And then I'm going to begin with the last person that came in. Yes, you're going to be up first. So I'll take, yeah. So I'll let you do this and we can get in.
Hello, everybody. My name is Brandon Landrum. I'm the Honor Student Engagement Coordinator. And one thing I appreciate about being Black at Cal State San Bernardino is just seeing the Black students here on campus, their goal and their initiatives to finish with their 4-year degree, but also really finding who they are becoming. So that's something that I'm very appreciative of.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, you good, you good. We'll keep you still.
It's okay.
Right,
my
blame
name-
it on Rafik.
My name's Sherika Bell. I'm the Assistant Director for Educational Talent Search out of the Office of Pre-College Programs. I also am serving as the current Vice President for Black Faculty, Staff, and Student Association here. So yes. Um, I'm also CSUSB alum. I've been here for a while, so it's nice to just be in these spaces and really not just see how campus culture for Black students is changing, but then step into my role in helping to kind of change culture back to how it was when Brandon and I were students and all the things that we had going for us as Black students. I'm actually looking forward to seeing more come out of this project because since I am in pre-college programs, I have a very interesting perspective of K-12 and higher education. And a lot of the work that I feel like I'm doing now is trying to find out from students like what is important to you when it comes to going to college. There's a lot of confusion, I think, or just a lack of education about really what the college dynamic is supposed to do outside of getting education, right? Like we all know that you go to college, you get degrees, you keep it moving, and so I'm really interested to continue to see this work happen, not just when it comes to professors and being in the classroom, but also that co-curricular, extracurricular outside of the classroom. How can we engage Black students, students in general, minority students, just to be interested in going to college outside of getting education, since that's not necessarily, as far as what we're seeing, that's not necessarily the goal, right? Students don't think they need college. So what can we do to enhance the college going experience just overall? So I'm really looking forward to what will continue to come out of this. And I do hope that we can shift perspective a little bit to not be so focused on what happens in the classroom, because I think there's a lot of community that's built outside of the classroom. So I'm really looking forward to that.
All right, looking at the clock, we got 30 seconds with everybody. Let's rock it.
Just glad to be here in community with each of you today. And also very excited that we're having this public dialogue about Black excellence.
I'll echo that. Glad to be here. I have an 18-year-old daughter who is in her quote unquote gap year. So I take away a lot from these events and hearing from you all as students that I can take back to her to say, hey, this is not just coming from me, like your mom, this is coming from your peer group of people who are students and who are getting things out of higher education. And it, like you said, it is important to go to college, and not just for the degrees and the things that they think of when they think of college, but also building a community, getting to know new people. So I really appreciate you all sharing today.
Take away.
Yeah, y'all my students, so I share with y'all a lot, but like definitely just wanted to echo like a lot of their sentiments is that all this faculty is for here for you. They get paid to be here for y'all, so take advantage of that. Y'all student fees are really what's creating our positions. So don't think any questions are stupid questions or anything that's on y'all mind. We're literally here for that, and we like to see y'all, and it is a pleasure to see y'all being involved. We show up for y'all, so we see y'all, we hear y'all, and we hope y'all keep showing up.
All right, Brandon.
Grateful for Black people choosing themselves and choosing to be themselves.
Grateful for mentorship from Dr. Gamble and Dr. Springer throughout my process here at Cal State.
Um, I'm grateful to be part of a group that supports Black people and also just supports equality as a whole.
I'm just grateful for the community and for everybody here, and just to be here, just to wake up is a blessing.
And I'm grateful for Rita. Right. That's right. That's going to be my girl. So she's been voluntold, so she's going to be part of the crew. I want her. All right, so what do we need? What's our action? What's our next step? So Black Excellence Project is here. You know a little bit about who we are. That was what we were hoping to do. We had a great conversation today, and we are identifying people who want to be ambassadors. We have some resources set aside to bring on a faculty, staff, and 2 student ambassadors for the work, because I always think it's important to have on-campus voices advocating for the work we're doing. And so we are going to reach out to those people who were here today. We're going to get them to come back and be a part of it. But I'm looking to officially engage those three folks in the work that we're doing. We also are going to do a set of student interviews, principally, but stakeholder interviews holistically. So we're going to have stakeholder interviews about the state of Blackness on campus. And so it's sort of our base level understanding of what does it mean to be Black at San Bernardino. And that's sort of the beginning base level conversations we're going to have. So those interviews will take place and those ambassadors will help us line up those interviews. Probably taking place at the beginning of April is what we're looking at now. So we'll be locking that in. And then lastly, but certainly not least, we're looking for community connections. One of the things that I am clear on, and one of the things came over and over and over from the students is they sometimes succeed despite the university. And the reason why they succeed is really their churches, it's their elected officials, it's their mom and pops, their businesses in the community. So we are working to put together a Black Student Success Committee represented by admin, faculty, staff, and students, but also represented by foundations, by elected and or governmental officials, by business owners, and by a foundation as well from the community. So bringing together these elements that can provide sustainability in times where you have shifting of personnel here that happens from time to time, right? People get new jobs, they move on, but we want to have community ties that has the institutional knowledge about what the assets are that we've identified. When I say we, I say they. That's what these interviews are going to be about, finding out what the assets here are on campus, and then putting together a group of folks who then can advocate for those assets to stay involved. So to help me achieve those goals that we're walking out this year, before we end and go away for the end of the year, we're doing that. I need the ambassadors on board to be able to get that work done. So if this has inspired you to want to get involved, please, I don't have my sign-in sheet, but in my head, you know these people. So if you get excited, reach out. You can get my contact information through Brandon. I am ready to go, y'all. I'm ready to show up for us. And hopefully y'all show up with me and we'll do something to shift the way folks are doing business as usual over here. For faculty who are watching, we want to shift your ability to be able to serve Black students. Never again will you feel like, I don't know what to do. How do I provide them resources? Oftentimes I feel that way when I have other groups that I don't know things about. So I make this practice personal for me. I know what a Latinx groups are, I know what the queer support groups are, I know who the allies are holistically on my campus. So if I get a student and I see a student and I feel that student needs something, I can provide them resources to help them. And that's the way I want to shift the way we're changing, the way we're thinking as faculty members. And I want to support this institution and helping to promote the good stuff that's going on here. Thank you all. Looking forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Here, thank you so much, Rita.
Gen Y.
Here you go. A picture of our, and we should get a picture of the kiddos.
All right.
I love that they get to be kiddos.